welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. I had just settled into my usual routine when the emergency alert came through. The familiar buzz of my phone startled me, the sharp vibration rattling against the dashboard of my patrol car. At first, I thought it was just another storm warning or an Amber Alert, something routine. But when I glanced at the screen, the message was different. Emergency Alert System, Severe Threat, Public Safety Alert. Do not enter any playgrounds after sunset. Do not engage with any children you see. Stay indoors until further notice. The alert flickered twice before vanishing. I frowned, unlocking my phone to check the details, but it was already gone, as if it had never been there. No follow-up, no explanation. Just a blunt warning, phrased like a government-issued directive. Weird. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Almost immediately, my work group chat lit up with messages from the other night shift guys. Rodney, yo, did you just get that alert? Jackson, WTF does that mean? Avoid playgrounds? Dale, LMAO, is this some kind of joke? Who hacks CAS to talk about playgrounds? I shook my head, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. Hack or not, it wasn't my problem. I worked private security, low risk, easy money. The company I worked for, Guardian Watch, contracted me to patrol Ridgewood Park after hours. It was a sleepy little place. A few nature trails, a baseball field, and a small, outdated playground tucked into the back. The town barely had a crime rate. My usual night consisted of driving in circles, making sure no high schoolers were sneaking in to drink or spray paint garbage cans. If there really was some kind of emergency, I figured the police would be handling it, not some underpaid security guard like me. I sighed, grabbing my thermos and taking a swig of cold coffee. It was going to be a long night. 9:15 p.m., arriving at Ridgewood Park. The park entrance loomed ahead, its iron gates already locked for the night. The town's parks department always secured them around sunset, but I had the master key, which let me in for patrols. As I unlocked the gate and drove inside, I noticed something odd. The place felt still, too still. Usually, even at night, there was some background noise. Crickets chirping, wind rustling through the trees, the occasional distant hum of traffic. But tonight, there was nothing. No wind, no insects, just silence. I rolled down my window, listening. Nothing. For a second, I thought about the emergency alert again. What did it mean by "do not engage with any children you see"? I shook off the thought. It was probably a stupid hoax. As I followed the paved road deeper into the park, the headlights of my patrol car illuminated the empty baseball field, the deserted picnic area, and finally, the playground. It sat at the farthest edge of the park, partially hidden behind a row of tall oak trees. I'd passed by it 100 times before, never paying much attention to it. But tonight it felt different. The jungle gym was old, made of rusted metal and faded plastic. A single swing hung from a frame of chipped blue paint, the other missing. The slide was dented and dull. The entire structure looked frozen in time, untouched by modern renovations. And yet, despite its age, the playground was spotless.
No graffiti, no litter,
no overgrown weeds pushing through the gravel. It was as if someone or something maintained it. I exhaled sharply. This job was messing with my head. I parked the car and grabbed my flashlight. Just a routine patrol. In and out. 9:30 p.m., the first signs. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. My flashlight beam swept across the playground, illuminating the swings, the monkey bars, the sandpit. Everything was still. I walked closer, my breath visible in the cold night air. The silence felt heavier here, like the playground was holding its breath. Then a sound. faint creak. I turned sharply, aiming my flashlight at the swings. One of them was moving, not wildly, not like it had just been used, but a slow, rhythmic sway, as if someone had barely nudged it. The wind, I told myself, but I knew that was bullshit. There was no wind tonight. A sudden burst of static crackled from my radio. I jolted, reaching for it. HHZZK. Static? ZZK. Playing tonight? The voice was distant, broken, barely audible. Repeat that, I asked, pressing the button. Silence. The radio was fine all day, no interference, no issues. But now, standing in front of this damn playground, it was acting up. I tried again. Dispatch, this is Graves. Comein. Nothing. Just that same low static. I exhaled, forcing myself to shake it off. Maybe it was the area. Signal could be spotty out here, especially this deep in the park. Still, something about this didn't sit right. I took another step forward, my boots sinking slightly into the loose gravel. That's when I heard it, giggling, soft, airy, like a child playing a game. I whipped my flashlight toward the sound, my pulse spiking. Nothing. The laughter had no source. It seemed to float in the air, surrounding me, vanishing just as quickly as it had come. I turned in a slow circle, scanning every inch of the playground, my breath coming faster now. Nothing. The swing had stopped moving. I stood frozen for a moment, heart hammering against my ribs. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me that something was wrong. Then, from the sandpit, I heard a soft thud. Something small rolled toward my boot. I looked down. A ball. A tiny, faded red rubber ball sat at my feet, perfectly round, like it had just been tossed. My throat went dry. I aimed my flashlight at the sandpit. It was empty.
No footprints.
No signs of movement. I crouched down, hesitating before picking up the ball. The rubber was warm, as if someone had just been holding it. I stood up abruptly, scanning the area again. My radio crackled once more, and this time, a voice came through clearly. Not just any voice.
Mine.
Hello. It was my own voice, my own tone, echoing back at me through the static. I dropped the ball. Screw this. I turned on my heel and strode back to my patrol car, forcing myself to keep my pace steady. I wasn't about to sprint like some rookie guard scared of his own shadow. I climbed into the car and locked the doors. My hands were clammy. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I was just tired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out here. And worse, whatever was out there wanted me to know it was watching. I sat in the patrol car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I hadn't just heard my own voice come through the radio. It had to be interference, a recording from a previous transmission, some weird frequency overlap. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The way it had mimicked me, same tone, same inflection, it wasn't natural. And the ball, the warm ball that had rolled toward my boot despite no one being there, something wasn't right with this place. I reached for my thermos, my hands still slightly unsteady as I took a sip of stale coffee. The taste was bitter, grounding me for a moment. Focus. I had a job to do. Whatever was happening, it wasn't my business. I'd do one last sweep and get the hell out of here. I grabbed my flashlight again, adjusting my utility belt as I stepped out of the vehicle. The cold night air wrapped around me like a damp blanket. The silence hadn't lifted. There was no wind, no insects, nothing. Just the empty playground sitting in the darkness. Waiting, I forced myself forward, boots crunching against the gravel. The beam of my flashlight swept across the jungle gym, the swings, the monkey bars. The ball I had dropped was still where I left it, half buried in the sand. No movement, no sound. Maybe I was just freaking myself out. I exhaled, stepping closer to the swing set. The first thing I noticed was that there were no footprints in the sand. No small shoe prints, no signs that anyone had walked through the area at all. The ball had rolled from somewhere, but from where? I frowned. Maybe it had just been lodged in the sand, dislodged by a breeze. No, there was no wind tonight. I turned my flashlight toward the monkey bars, scanning the metal rungs for anything unusual. My brain was screaming at me to find something rational. a sign of an animal, a prank, anything that made sense. Then, from behind me, I heard the faintest whisper, "Come play." I spun so fast I nearly lost my footing. The beam of my flashlight caught nothing but empty space. But the voice, I wasn't imagining it. Someone had whispered those words, close enough that I should have felt their breath on my neck. I swallowed hard, tightening my grip on the flashlight. Is someone there? No answer. I turned back to the swing set and stopped cold. The swings were moving again, but this time not just one. All 3 swings were swaying in unison, back and forth, a slow and deliberate motion, as if something unseen was sitting in each of them. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. I took a cautious step forward, my instincts screaming at me to leave. Then a shadow flickered in my periphery. I snapped my flashlight toward the slide, catching a glimpse of something small and pale, just beyond the edge of my vision. My breath caught in my throat. There, standing by the bottom of the slide, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, dressed in what looked like old-fashioned pajamas. His skin was deathly pale, his arms hanging limply at his sides. But it was his face that sent ice water through my veins. His eyes were wrong, completely black, like polished stone, reflecting my flashlight beam but giving away nothing beneath the surface. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words died in my throat. The boy tilted his head at an unnatural angle, staring at me. Then, in a voice that was exactly like mine, he whispered, "Is someone there?" My blood turned to ice. That was my voice. He had mimicked it perfectly, the same way the radio had. I took a step back, instinct overriding logic. "Stay right there, kid." The boy blinked, slowly, as if processing my words. Then he grinned. It was the only emotion he had shown so far, but it was wrong. Too wide, stretching his face unnaturally. A mouth full of small, perfectly even teeth, like a doll's. I took another step back. I said, "Stay right there." He didn't listen. The boy took one slow step toward me, then another, and then in an instant he was gone. Not like he had run, not like he had ducked out of view, just gone. The night swallowed him whole, like he had never been there at all. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged. My flashlight beam danced wildly as I scanned the playground, but there was nothing. Nothing except the whispering wind. Wait, there hadn't been wind before, and now it was everywhere. A low, whistling sound, circling the playground like 1,000 hushed voices murmuring at once. Then the radio on my belt crackled. My hands were shaking as I reached for it, pressing the call button. "Dispatch, this is Graves. Do you copy?" The static rose in volume, and then, through the interference, I heard a voice, faint, distorted. Not my voice this time, a child's voice. "You're not supposed to be here." I felt my stomach drop. The radio fell silent again. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. Then, somewhere in the distance, a metallic screech. I turned my flashlight wildly, just in time to see the merry-go-round begin to spin on its own. Slowly at first, then faster, faster, faster. The rusted metal groaned under the sudden force, but there was no one there to push it. That was the final straw. I bolted for my patrol car, my boots sliding across the loose gravel as I forced myself not to look back. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. My breathing was ragged, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat there for a moment, chest heaving, willing my heart to slow down. It was a prank. It had to be a prank. But deep down, I knew better. I reached for my phone to call dispatch directly. Maybe they could send someone else out here, someone who wouldn't feel like they were going insane. I unlocked my phone. My stomach turned. A new emergency alert had appeared on the screen. Emergency alert system. Severe threat. Public safety alert. If you encounter a child on the playground, do not speak to it. Do not let it follow you home. My blood ran cold. I looked up. In the rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat, was the boy, smiling. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My fingers were locked around the steering wheel, my knuckles bone white, but I couldn't turn. I didn't want to see it. The boy, the thing pretending to be a boy, was sitting in my back seat, his reflection perfectly clear in the rearview mirror, smiling, that wide, doll-like grin that stretched too far across his pale face. I felt a cold sweat break across my skin, my breath shallow and ragged. My mind screamed at me to act, to do something, but my body wouldn't listen. Every instinct I had was telling me that if I moved too fast, if I turned too sharply, if I acknowledged him in the wrong way, something terrible would happen. The radio crackled again, the static rising in a slow, suffocating hum. Then, through the distortion, I heard it, a child giggling. It wasn't coming from the radio, it was coming from the back seat, a sick, airy little laugh, light, playful, like this was all a game. "You're not supposed to be here." The voice was soft, right behind my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. I gripped the wheel even harder, my fingernails digging into the leather. My pulse hammered against my skull. I had to get out of here, slowly, so slowly. I reached for the gear shift, keeping my eyes locked on the mirror. The boy didn't move. He just sat there, small and still, his legs swinging slightly off the edge of the seat. Watching me, my fingers found the gear shift. I swallowed hard and put the car into reverse, my foot easing onto the gas. The patrol car rolled backward, tires crunching against the gravel. The boy's smile widened. I felt bile rise in my throat, but I didn't look away. I didn't blink, couldn't. I maneuvered the car out of the lot, turning it toward the main road. The moment I hit pavement, I floored it. The tires screeched against the asphalt as the car shot forward, headlights cutting through the dark. I expected something to happen, for him to lunge at me, for the car to stall, for the voice to whisper something worse. But nothing happened. I kept driving. My heart slammed against my ribs as I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus on the road. Don't look in the mirror. Don't check the back seat. Don't acknowledge it. I drove straight out of the park, the entrance gate blurring past me. My hands were trembling, my breaths coming in quick, uneven gasps. I had to get to town, somewhere with people, bright lights, reality. I risked a glance at the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. The boy was gone. A deep, shuddering breath forced its way out of my chest. I didn't slow down. 9:58 p.m., reaching the station. I pulled into the Guardian Watch security office at nearly 60 miles per hour, slamming on the brakes just before the front lot. The engine roared before falling silent. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? The alert, the whispers, the thing in my back seat. No, I hadn't imagined it. I grabbed my phone with a shaky hand, pulling up the emergency alert again. Severe threat, public safety alert. If you encounter a child on the playground, do not speak to it. Do not let it follow you home. The words glowed against the screen, cold and final. I forced myself to breathe. I had to tell someone. I shoved the door open and stumbled into the building, my legs still weak beneath me. The station was small, just a glorified office with 2 rooms and a break area, but it felt like a lifeline. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, making the whole place feel sterile and artificial. But I didn't care. It was better than the dark. Rodney and Jackson were at the front desk, arguing over something on a clipboard. They looked up as I stormed in. Jackson frowned. "Dude, you look like shit. I need to talk to dispatch," I said, my voice hoarse. Rodney leaned back in his chair. "What happened?" I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That I'd seen a thing on the playground? That it had spoken to me in my own voice? That it had followed me? They'd laugh me out of the building. Instead, I shoved my phone in Rodney's face. "Did you get this?" He squinted at the screen. "The alert." "Yeah. Did you get one?" Rodney looked at Jackson, then back at me. "Dude, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't get any alert tonight." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "It came through the EAS system." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "No, it didn't." I stared at them, heart pounding. I opened my messages, scrolling desperately. "No, I saw it. Came through. It was right here." I reached the emergency alert and it was gone. The notification was nowhere to be found, like it had never existed. I felt my breath hitch. Rodney watched me, amused. "You good, man?" I swallowed. I could still see it. I remembered every word, but it was gone. I locked my phone, pulse hammering in my ears. Jackson leaned forward. Seriously, what happened? I hesitated. I could still feel it, that lingering presence, that wrongness in the air. Even now, in the brightly lit office, I felt like something was watching me. I forced out a shaky breath. Nothing, I muttered. Rodney snorted. Dude, you look like you saw a ghost. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the break room, my thoughts racing. Something had happened tonight, something real. And worst of all, I had the sickening feeling that whatever followed me out of that park, it wasn't finished with me yet. I didn't sleep that night, not really. After leaving the security office, I drove straight home, locking every door behind me. I turned on every light in my apartment, even the ones in the bathroom and kitchen. The darkness felt too thick, too full. I double-checked my windows, drew the curtains, blocked every reflective surface I could with blankets and towels. Because every time I looked into a mirror, every time I passed a dark window, I was afraid I'd see him. That thing with my voice, that thing that had been in my back seat. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping my phone, my pulse thrumming in my ears. My gut told me to call someone, anyone. But who the hell was I supposed to talk to? What would I even say? Hey, I think some kind of thing followed me home from a playground. Also, I got a government-issued emergency alert, but now it's just gone. Yeah, that would go over well. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. My body ached with exhaustion, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that grin, that perfectly even row of teeth, the buzzing silence of the playground, the swings moving on their own, the merry-go-round spinning too fast. It wasn't normal. None of it was normal. I needed answers, but first I needed to make it through the night. 3:12 a.m., the reflection that wasn't mine. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, my bedroom was darker than I remembered. My bedside lamp was off. My breath hitched. I knew I had left it on. I sat up slowly, my ears straining for any sound. The apartment was silent, too silent. The hum of the fridge gone. The faint ticking of the clock in my kitchen gone. The distant sound of traffic outside gone. It was like the whole world had been placed under a thick, suffocating blanket. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling. The screen lit up. 3:12 a.m. And then my stomach dropped. I wasn't alone, because there was movement. Not in my room, not on my bed. In the mirror, the bathroom mirror just outside my open bedroom door. The hallway light was still on, casting a pale glow against the glass. And in it, I saw myself, standing in the hallway. But I wasn't in the hallway. My reflection was, and it was watching me. I froze, every muscle locking up. My pulse slammed against my ribs, my breath caught in my throat. The reflection of me was standing completely still. But something was wrong. It was too dark. My bedroom was dim, but there was still enough light to see the faint glow of my phone screen. Yet in the mirror, my reflection was shrouded in shadow, as if it were standing in a place where light couldn't reach. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around my phone. This wasn't real, couldn't be real. I slowly moved my right hand. The reflection didn't move. I moved my head slightly. The reflection stayed perfectly still. Then, in one slow, deliberate movement, it grinned. A silent, too wide smile stretched across its face, revealing that same row of perfectly even teeth. I sucked in a sharp breath. My chest locked up. It wasn't me. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. I needed to move. Now, I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over the sheets. My legs felt weak, my body sluggish, like I was moving through thick air. I reached for the light switch, flipped it on. Nothing. The power was dead. I cursed under my breath, my pulse thundering. My reflection still stood in the mirror, its grin stretching impossibly wide. Then it moved, not like a normal person, not like a reflection. It stepped forward, and as it did, the mirror rippled, like the surface of a still lake. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged. No. The lights in the hallway flickered, the mirror distorted, like something was pushing against it from the other side. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I did the only thing I could. I grabbed the nearest object and hurled it at the mirror. Crash. The glass shattered, splintering into 1,000 jagged shards. I stood there, panting, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. The hallway light flickered again. Then, as suddenly as it had gone silent, the world snapped back to normal. The hum of my fridge returned, the distant sound of a car passing outside, the clock in my kitchen ticking again. The silence was gone. I stared at the broken mirror, my breath shuddering. The pieces lay scattered across the tile floor, reflecting bits of light. And in one of the larger shards, I saw movement, a hand, small, pale, slipping out of sight, like something had just crawled away. I backed away, my stomach churning. This wasn't over. I could feel it. Somehow I had brought it with me, and now it was in my home. I didn't sleep after that, not even for a second. I sat on my bed, knees drawn up to my chest, my fingers gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles ached. I kept my eyes on the broken shards of the mirror, watching, waiting. The power had come back, but I still felt it, that thick, suffocating presence lurking just out of sight. The air was heavier than it should have been, as if something was still here. I checked my phone again. 4:37 a.m. The hours crawled by like something was wrong with time itself. Had it really only been a few minutes since the mirror shattered? Felt like hours, days. The memory of the hand, small, pale, slipping out of sight, made my stomach twist. What had I seen? Where had it gone? I forced myself to take a slow, uneven breath. My apartment was too quiet. It was like holding my breath in the dark, waiting for something to lunge at me, but nothing did. Not yet. 5 a.m., the missing shard. I didn't move from the bed until the sky outside started turning gray. The early hints of dawn pushed against the blinds, casting soft shadows across my floor. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. I needed to clean up the mirror. Glass littered the floor outside my bedroom door, reflecting slivers of pale light. I stepped carefully, my heart still hammering, but nothing felt wrong. Not yet. I crouched down, gathering the shards into a small pile. My hands trembled as I picked up the larger pieces, the jagged edges biting against my fingertips. That was when I noticed it. One of the larger shards, the one where I had seen the hand, was missing. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, cold dread curling through my chest. I had heard the mirror break. The glass should have been everywhere. So where was it? I slowly scanned the floor, my stomach twisting into knots. And then, from somewhere behind me, a soft tap. I sucked in a sharp breath. Tap, 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 slow, rhythmic, coming from the closet. I turned my head stiffly, barely breathing. The closet door was closed, but something was tapping against it from the inside. My entire body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I could only listen. Tap, 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 like small fingers knocking on wood, like a child waiting to be let out. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. No, this wasn't happening. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady beneath me. The room felt wrong. The air was heavier, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. I took a slow step forward, then another. The tapping stopped. Silence. I reached out, fingers barely grazing the closet handle. Bang! Something slammed against the door from the inside. I staggered backward, a strangled gasp catching in my throat. No, 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 no. I grabbed the closest thing, a lamp from my nightstand, and hurled it at the door. It shattered against the wood, the bulb bursting into a bright flash of sparks before the room was plunged back into dim morning light. Silence. I stood there, chest heaving, waiting. Nothing moved, nothing made a sound. But I knew it was still in there, waiting, watching. I wasn't alone in my apartment anymore, and I wasn't sure I ever had been. 6:15 a.m., the playground report. I couldn't stay here. The weight of the air, the lingering wrongness, it was too much. I needed answers. I needed to go back to the security station. I dressed quickly, shoving my phone and keys into my pocket before stepping into my shoes. As I moved past the closet, I felt my skin crawl. I refused to look at the door. I refused to acknowledge it. because if I even glanced at it, I knew I would see something peeking back at me. I left my apartment in a rush, slamming the door behind me. The morning air hit me like a slap, cold, fresh, real. I inhaled sharply, grounding myself. It's okay. You're outside. Can't follow you here. I repeated it in my head like a mantra as I drove toward the security station. When I arrived, Rodney was already there, nursing a coffee at the front desk. He raised an eyebrow as I walked in. You look like hell. I ignored the comment. Did anything else happen last night? Rodney blinked. What? At the park? At the playground? Any other reports? He frowned, setting his coffee down. No, man. Why? I swallowed, my throat dry. I couldn't just tell him everything. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my deleted messages. The emergency alert was still gone, like it had never existed. I clenched my jaw. Rodney was watching me carefully. Dude, seriously, what's going on? I hesitated. Then finally I exhaled. I saw something last night. Rodney raised an eyebrow. Saw what? I swallowed again. A kid. On the playground. Rodney's expression darkened slightly. What time? Almost 9. He frowned. That late? I nodded. Rodney sat back, rubbing his chin. Damn. Maybe I should check the cameras. My stomach twisted. There are cameras? Yeah. The city put up a few last year. They're motion activated, but we can pull the footage. My pulse quickened. Can you check last night? Rodney eyed me suspiciously but shrugged, turning toward the security monitor. He tapped a few keys, pulling up the park surveillance footage. The screen flickered. The grainy black and white image of the playground appeared. Empty. Rodney scrubbed through the footage. 8:45 p.m. Nothing. 8:50 p.m. Nothing. 8:55 p.m. Nothing. And then, at exactly 9 p.m., the screen glitched. For a fraction of a second, the image distorted. Then, static. Rodney frowned. What the hell? He clicked again, skipping forward. The next clear frame was at 9:10 p.m. The playground was empty, like nothing had ever been there. No child, no movement, nothing. Rodney shook his head. That's weird. The cameras don't usually cut out. My fingers curled into fists because I knew what I had seen. I knew what had followed me home, and now I knew something didn't want to be seen. And that meant one thing. It wasn't done with me yet. Rodney stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. That's weird, he muttered, clicking through the security footage again. The feed's been fine all week. But look, he pointed at the timeline. Between 8:59 p.m. and 9:10 p.m., it's just gone. I felt cold. I knew what happened during those lost minutes. I had been there. I had seen the things sitting on the swings, grinning at me. I had heard my own voice in the back seat on the way home, and I had watched something move in my mirror. Rodney scratched the back of his head. Probably a glitch. Yeah, I said, but my voice was hollow. We both knew it wasn't a glitch. The camera had been working fine until the exact moment something was there, and then it had cut out, like something had erased itself. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Are there other cameras? Rodney sighed, rubbing his eyes. There's one by the parking lot, but it's not pointed at the playground. I'll check it. He clicked over to a different feed. The parking lot appeared. The footage was clearer, though slightly grainy under the orange glow of the streetlights. Rodney fast-forwarded. 8:58 p.m., my car pulls into the lot. 8:59 p.m., I get out and walk toward the playground. 9 p.m., static. The screen glitched again. For a split second, the image warped like something was pressing against the lens. And then the feed cut out completely. Rodney exhaled sharply. Okay, that's not normal. He clicked forward. 9:10 p.m., the feed comes back, and I'm sprinting to my car. I watched myself on the screen, hands shaking. My movements were frantic, erratic, like a man running for his life. I yanked open the car door, practically throwing myself inside. And then, for a split second, something moved in the back seat. I felt my stomach twist. The figure was barely visible, a shadow in the car, a small, pale hand reaching toward me. And then the frame changed. I had already slammed the door. The car was empty again. Rodney leaned forward, staring at the screen. What the hell was that? I couldn't answer. I was too busy trying not to be sick, because I knew exactly what it was. The thing had followed me. It had been in the car. I had driven it home, and now it was still with me. 8:30 a.m., the rules. Rodney rubbed his jaw, still watching the screen. "All right," he said. "I don't know what kind of horror movie shit this is, but I'm not letting you deal with this alone." His words should have made me feel better. They didn't. Nothing could. Not anymore. "I need to figure out what this is," I muttered. Rodney frowned. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then pulled out my phone. My messages were still empty. No emergency alert. No proof, but I remembered what it said. Avoid playgrounds. Do not interact with unfamiliar children. Do not acknowledge them. My pulse quickened. I had acknowledged it. I had spoken to it. I had looked at it, and now it wouldn't leave. Rodney crossed his arms. "Maybe we should call someone." "Who?" I asked bitterly. "The police? Hey, I think a ghost kid followed me home. They'll think I'm insane." Rodney grunted. "Fair point." I took a shaky breath, trying to think. What if there's more info online? Rodney grabbed his phone. "I'll check." He typed something in, scrolling. His eyes narrowed. "Huh, what?" Rodney turned the screen toward me. An old forum post from a few years ago. The title made my blood run cold. "Don't acknowledge the playground kids." I grabbed the phone. The post was from someone claiming to be a former park worker. They talked about strange occurrences. Kids appearing out of nowhere, staring without blinking, their faces too still. People who interacted with them reported missing time, blackouts, strange reflections, and worse, they were never alone again. The final paragraph made my skin crawl. "If you acknowledge them, they won't leave. They'll follow you. They'll wait. And eventually, they'll replace you." I swallowed hard, my hands clammy. Rodney shifted beside me. "Dude," I didn't respond, because something else caught my eye. Comment at the bottom of the post. One that had just been posted, from a user named Reflection23. And all it said was, "You already saw it. It's too late." 9 a.m., the open door. Couldn't breathe. I set the phone down carefully, like it might bite me. Rodney looked pale. "You think someone's messing with you?" I shook my head. I didn't know, but I felt it. Something was watching me. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to ground myself. "I can't go back to my apartment." Rodney nodded. "Then stay at my place for a bit. We'll figure this out." I wanted to argue, to say I could handle it, but I was terrified of going home, so I nodded. "Yeah, okay." Rodney grabbed his things, and we headed out to the parking lot. The morning sun was bright, almost mocking after the night I'd had. I exhaled slowly, unlocking my car. "I'll follow you." Rodney gave me a small nod and turned toward his truck. I opened my car door and froze. My passenger side door was already open, a sliver, barely an inch, like someone had just slipped inside. I hadn't left it open. I knew I hadn't. My breath came out in short, shaky bursts. I stared at the open door, my body screaming at me to run. And then a soft giggle from inside the car. My blood turned to ice. No. I reached out with a shaking hand and slammed the door shut. Rodney turned, frowning. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah." I climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers ached. I didn't look at the rearview mirror. I refused, because I knew if I did, I would see something grinning back at me. I didn't check the mirror. I didn't dare. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The car was too quiet. No radio, no background noise, just my own shallow breathing and the low hum of the engine. Rodney pulled out of the lot first, his truck rolling onto the main road. I followed, forcing myself to stay focused. I couldn't let it influence me. The open door, the giggle, the way the security footage glitched out at the exact moment something appeared. I gritted my teeth, pushing the thoughts away. The roads were mostly empty. Early morning sunlight cast long shadows across the asphalt, stretching in ways that didn't feel entirely natural. I kept my eyes forward. I refused to look in the rearview mirror. I could feel it, something watching, waiting, but I wasn't going to give it what it wanted. Not this time. 9:45 a.m., Rodney's apartment. Rodney's place was on the third floor of a rundown apartment complex. The kind of building where the hallway lights flickered, the stairwell smelled like mildew, and the landlord didn't fix anything unless you harassed him for weeks. But right now, felt safer than my own home. Rodney unlocked the door, gesturing me inside. "Make yourself at home, man." I stepped in, my body still on edge. The apartment was cluttered, old takeout containers on the table, a pile of laundry near the couch, a TV remote with a missing battery cover. It smelled like stale coffee and cheap air freshener. Felt normal. Rodney grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, cracking them open. "So," he handed me one. "What's the plan?" I hesitated. I didn't have a plan. I barely had an understanding of what was happening to me. "I need to figure out how to get rid of it," I muttered. Rodney took a long sip. "You think it's a ghost?" "I don't know. A demon?" I hesitated, remembering the forum post. The phrase that refused to leave my head. "They'll replace you." "I think it's worse." Rodney raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Instead, he grabbed his laptop, plopping onto the couch. "Let's see if we can dig up anything else." I nodded, setting my beer down. I didn't feel like drinking. I felt like running, but I had nowhere left to go. 10:30 a.m., the name. Rodney scrolled through forums, old articles, anything he could find about playground disappearances or weird occurrences. Most of it was dead ends. Until, "Hey!" Rodney sat up straighter. "Check this out." I leaned over his shoulder, my pulse quickening. The webpage was ancient, one of those early 2000 sites with a black background and neon green text. "The Lost Ones, Playground Entities and Their Victims." Rodney scrolled down. The article mentioned cases dating back decades. Children who had been seen on playgrounds long after they went missing. People who had spoken to them and were never the same afterward. Rodney clicked a sublink. A list of victims popped up. I skimmed the names, heart pounding. And then I froze. My name was on the list. I stared at the screen, my breath hitching. No, that wasn't possible. Rodney noticed my reaction. "Dude," I slowly lifted a shaking hand, pointing at the screen. The entry read, "Daniel Carter spoke to a child on a playground. Status: infected." My full name, already there, like someone had been expecting me. Rodney cursed under his breath. "What the hell?" I felt sick. I lurched away from the laptop, my stomach twisting. My name shouldn't be there. This wasn't just something I stumbled into. It had been waiting for me, and now it knew who I was. 10:45 a.m., the knock. I was still pacing, my skin crawling, when I heard it. "Knock, knock, knock." Rodney looked up. "You expecting someone?" I shook my head. We both stared at the door. "Knock, knock, knock." Slow, rhythmic, exactly 3 taps. A chill crawled down my spine. Rodney stood, moving toward the peephole. I wanted to stop him. Something in my gut screamed not to look. But before I could speak, Rodney peered outside. He stiffened. "What?" I whispered. Rodney didn't answer. Slowly, his expression changed. His lips parted slightly. His eyes went blank. I felt a surge of panic. "Rodney!" He didn't react. He just stood there, staring through the peephole, his face completely empty. Then his mouth twitched, and he started to smile. My heart nearly stopped, because that smile, it wasn't his. It was too wide, too wrong. I moved fast. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked him back. He stumbled, blinking rapidly, the color returning to his face. "What the?" I slammed my hand against the peephole, covering it. My voice was shaking. "Don't look at it." Rodney exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Jesus." What just happened? I didn't answer, couldn't, because I already knew. It was here. It had followed me, and it was knocking on the door. 11 a.m., the wrong reflection. Rodney locked the door. Deadbolt, chain, everything. Neither of us spoke. The knock didn't come again, but the feeling remained, like something was still waiting. I sat on the couch, my hands still shaking. Rodney sat across from me, rubbing his temples. Then Rodney's phone buzzed. He grabbed it, frowning. Unknown number. My stomach twisted. Rodney hesitated, then put it on speaker. Silence. Then a voice. A child's voice. It was quiet, faint, and it said my name. Danny. Rodney stiffened. The hell? Couldn't breathe. Danny. Why are you hiding? The voice was too familiar. It sounded like me. Perfect imitation. Rodney hung up immediately, staring at the phone like it might burst into flames. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't Danny anymore. Not to it. I was just a reflection. And somewhere out there, the real me was waiting to take my place. Rodney's phone sat on the coffee table, screen dim, like nothing had happened. But we both knew something had spoken to us, something using my voice. Rodney swallowed hard. What the hell was that? I shook my head. It's not me. It was a poor explanation. But what else could I say? How do you explain that something is copying you? Mimicking you? Waiting for the right moment to replace you? Rodney exhaled sharply. He was trying to play it cool, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he was gripping the couch like he was afraid to let go. All right, he said, running a hand through his hair. Let's think. It called you Danny. I tensed. I haven't used that name since I was a kid. Rodney gave me a wary glance. So whatever this thing is, it knows you. Like, really knows you. I didn't answer, because the truth was even worse. It didn't just know me, it was trying to become me. 11:15 a.m., the mirror test. Rodney stood abruptly, grabbing his phone. I need to check something. I watched as he walked down the hall and into the bathroom. A few seconds later, he cursed under his breath. What? I called. Come here. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to stay put, but I needed to know. I forced myself to stand and walk toward the bathroom. Rodney was standing in front of the mirror. His reflection stared back. Mine didn't. My blood ran cold. I stepped into view. I was right there, standing next to Rodney, but in the mirror I wasn't. The space where my reflection should have been was empty, like I wasn't really there. Rodney looked at me, eyes wide. Okay, he whispered. That's not normal. I lifted a shaking hand, waving it in front of the mirror. Nothing. And then the reflection twitched. Not mine, something else. The empty space in the mirror flickered, and suddenly I was there, but it wasn't me. My reflection was smiling, too wide, too sharp, and then, in a voice that was almost mine, it whispered, I can see you. Rodney yanked me backward. The bathroom door slammed shut. We stood in the hallway, breathing heavily. Rodney wiped a hand down his face. Okay, new rule. No more mirrors. I nodded, heart hammering, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't done with me yet. Not even close. 12 p.m., the news broadcast. Rodney kept the TV on, flipping through channels mindlessly. I think it made him feel like things were still normal. I just sat on the couch, staring at the blank wall. What was happening to me? Had anyone ever gotten rid of this thing? Or was it only a matter of time before it replaced me? Rodney stopped flipping channels. Hold on. I turned. The news was on, but something was wrong. The screen was flickering, the signal distorted. The news anchor's face was slightly off, like it had been stretched, reshaped into something that resembled a person but wasn't quite right. Then the words appeared on the screen. Emergency alert system. Do not acknowledge them. Do not respond to unfamiliar children. Avoid playgrounds. A hollow, robotic voice echoed through the speakers. This is a statewide emergency. Reports of unidentified individuals have increased. They may appear as loved ones or familiar faces. Do not trust them. Rodney stared. I felt something cold creep down my spine because I realized something. This alert was different from the one I got. The wording had changed, and now it wasn't just talking about the playgrounds. It was talking about me. 12:30 p.m., the call from me. Rodney muted the TV. He was pale. Dude, I don't like this. Neither do I. My phone buzzed. A new number. Unknown caller. I stared at it. Rodney shifted uneasily. Don't answer. I didn't. But then the voicemail came through. Rodney and I looked at each other. Slowly, I tapped to play it. A familiar voice came through. My voice. But it wasn't a recording. It was speaking. Rodney, don't trust him. My stomach dropped. Rodney's face went white. The voice on the phone continued. That's not Danny. He's the copy. Don't let him fool you. Rodney stared at me, suddenly uneasy. Dude, he said cautiously. I shook my head. No, you know me. That's not me. Rodney's hands curled into fists. How do I know that? I went silent because I didn't have an answer. And that's when I realized this thing wasn't just replacing me. It was turning people against me. Rodney rubbed his face, exhaling shakily. I don't know what to think, man. I stepped forward. Rodney, please. And then Rodney's phone buzzed. We both froze. He lifted it hesitantly. A text. From me. Let me in. Rodney's breath hitched, and then something knocked on the door. 12:45 p.m. The wrong knock. Rodney and I didn't move. The knock came again. 3 slow taps, exactly like before. Rodney was shaking. Danny, knock, knock, knock. It was waiting. Rodney grabbed his phone, typing something. A moment later, my phone buzzed. I looked. Rodney had just texted me. If you're really you, prove it. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. How could I prove I was me? I swallowed hard, my fingers moving. I typed one sentence. Rodney read it, and then very slowly, he nodded. Outside, the knocking stopped, and the thing pretending to be me walked away. Rodney exhaled shakily, lowering his phone. Outside, the hallway was silent. The thing that had knocked, the thing pretending to be me, was gone. For now. Rodney's fingers tightened around his phone. What the hell, man? His voice was raw, laced with fear. How do I even know I'm making the right call? What if I'm wrong? I swallowed hard, because he was right to question it. That thing was smart. It had mimicked me perfectly. My voice, my habits, even my name. But I had one advantage. It didn't remember everything. When Rodney asked me to prove I was real, I typed something only the real me would know. Your first car was a red Honda. You crashed it backing out of a Taco Bell. It was stupid. A dumb memory from high school. But it was real. Rodney never told that story to anyone but me. His lips pressed into a thin line. Okay. He nodded. It's you. I believe you. But the way he looked at me. Asterisk, hesitant, uncertain. Asterisk, told me that doubt had already taken root. And that's exactly what it wanted. 1 p.m., it wants me gone. Rodney paced the room, his hands on his hips. So what now? We just wait until it tries again. I shook my head. No, I need to end this. He shot me a sharp look. And how do you do that? I hesitated, because I didn't know. I only had one lead, the forum post from before. The warning about the playgrounds. And if that was where this thing first found me, then maybe that's where I needed to go. Rodney saw the look on my face and frowned. No way, I have to. That's insane, man. If you go back, it'll just... He threw up his hands. I don't know. Finish whatever it started. I don't have a choice. Rodney shook his head, frustrated. Then his phone buzzed again. We both looked down. Another text. From my number. It's almost time. Rodney shuddered, flipping his phone face down. Screw this. He turned to me. All right, you want to go back? Fine. But I'm coming with you. I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off. No way I'm letting you go alone, dude. If you're right, and this thing is trying to replace you, then you need someone watching your back. I hesitated, then nodded, because deep down, I knew I wouldn't survive this alone. 2:15 p.m., the final playground. We parked 2 blocks away from the playground. It looked exactly the same as before. The rusted swings, the empty slide, the cracked pavement. But something felt different. The air was thick, too still, like the world was holding its breath. Rodney wiped his palms on his jeans. Okay, we're here. Now what? I didn't answer, because I had no plan. I only knew one thing. Started here, so it has to end here. I stepped forward, crossing the threshold onto the playground. The moment I did, the world shifted. The sounds of the city dulled. Rodney took a step back. Dude, and then the laughter began. My stomach twisted. That same childlike giggle I heard before. But now it was closer. Right behind me, I turned and saw him, a boy standing near the rusted slide. His face was wrong. Blurry, unfinished. His skin was pale, his clothes faded like an old photograph, and his eyes, they were mine. Rodney sucked in a breath. Jesus Christ, the boy smiled, and then, in my own voice, he whispered, "It's okay, Danny. You can rest now." 2:20 p.m., the trade. I took a slow step back. My heart was pounding. Rodney whispered, "Tell me you see that." "I do." My voice was hoarse. The boy tilted his head. His form flickered, and suddenly, he wasn't a boy anymore. He was me. Same height, same clothes, same face. Rodney swore under his breath. Nope, I'm done. I'm so done." Couldn't breathe. It was me, perfectly copied. Took a step forward, and then another. I backed away and hit something solid. A cold wave of dread crashed over me. I turned my head. There was a mirror, freestanding right in the middle of the playground. It hadn't been there before, and in the reflection, I was missing again, except for the other me. He stood there watching me through the glass, smiling. The laughter grew louder. The world tilted. I was losing my grip on reality. Rodney grabbed my arm. "Danny, don't look at it." But I couldn't look away, because in the reflection, he was reaching out, extending a hand toward me, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "It's okay. Just take my hand." The air around me crackled. Something was pulling me in, like gravity had shifted. I could feel myself slipping. I dug my heels into the ground, but it didn't matter. I was being dragged toward the mirror. Rodney grabbed me. "Fight it." I struggled, but my hand was already inches away from the glass, and the thing in the mirror just kept smiling. 2:22 p.m., the last choice. Couldn't break free. It was too strong. Rodney was yelling something, but his voice was fading. The world was growing distant. I felt my fingertips brush the surface of the glass, and then Rodney did the only thing he could. He shattered the mirror. The sound was deafening. A high-pitched screech ripped through the air. The glass exploded into 1,000 shards. I fell backward, gasping, and when I looked up, the other me was gone. The laughter had stopped. Rodney was panting. Holy shit. I swallowed hard, staring at the shattered glass. The reflection was gone. Had we won? Had it actually worked? I wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. It was over, or at least, I thought it was, because as we stumbled away from the playground, Rodney muttered, "Dude, you're bleeding." I frowned. "What?" He pointed. I looked down and saw a long, thin cut on my palm, like I had touched something sharp, like I had touched broken glass. And in my head, I swore I heard the faintest whisper, a voice that sounded exactly like mine. "See you soon." Rodney's car felt like the safest place in the world right now. We sat in silence, the only sounds being our ragged breathing and the faint hum of the engine. My hands were trembling. I kept staring at the cut on my palm, a thin, precise line. Rodney gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He was watching me, but he wasn't saying anything, because we both knew something had changed. I wasn't sure if we had really won, or if I had just brought something back with me. 3 p.m., the silent drive. We drove in complete silence. Rodney's eyes flicked to me in the rearview mirror every few seconds, like he was double-checking, like he wasn't completely sure it was me. I didn't blame him. I wasn't completely sure either. Every time I moved, every time I breathed, I kept waiting for something to feel wrong, waiting for my reflection to not match up, for my voice to sound off, for some tiny, impossible detail to prove I wasn't me anymore. But nothing happened. Not yet. Rodney's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "I need to ask." I didn't answer, but he asked anyway. "Are you sure it's over?" I inhaled shakily. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him that the shattered mirror had ended it, that the thing pretending to be me was gone, erased from existence. But the words caught in my throat, because I wasn't sure. "Not really." Rodney sighed, rubbing his temple. "Yeah, that's what I thought." He made a sharp turn, and that's when I realized we weren't going back to his place. We weren't going anywhere familiar. The street was empty. The streetlights weren't on. The sky had turned a shade too dark, like the sun had set too quickly. And at the end of the road, there was another playground. 3:30 p.m., the wrong playground. My chest tightened. "No," I whispered. Rodney kept driving. His knuckles were bone white against the steering wheel. I didn't turn down this road. I turned toward him sharply. What do you mean? I mean I was heading toward my apartment. And now we're here. I looked back out the window. The playground looked identical to the one from before. The rusted swings, the cracked pavement, the same eerie, unnatural stillness. My blood ran cold. It was like we had never left. Rodney slammed the brakes. I'm not doing this. We're leaving. He threw the car into reverse, but the road behind us was gone, vanished into a wall of thick, impenetrable fog. Rodney's breathing turned sharp. Panicked. No, no, no. The radio flickered on. A familiar robotic voice came through the static. Emergency alert system. My stomach twisted. Do not acknowledge them. Do not respond to unfamiliar children. Avoid playgrounds. And then, in a lower voice, unless you've already seen yourself. I went ice cold. Rodney turned to me, shaking. What the hell does that mean? I had no answer, but I had a feeling we were about to find out. 3:45 p.m. The thing in the car. Something knocked on my window. 3 slow, rhythmic taps. I turned my head and my stomach dropped. A boy stood outside. He was blurry, unfinished. His face was smudged, shifting like static. But his eyes, they were mine. And when he spoke, his voice was soft. Danny, it's time to go. Rodney grabbed my wrist. Don't move, he whispered. I wasn't planning to, because I had made a mistake. I thought this thing had been trying to replace me, but I had it backward. It had been waiting for me to accept it, waiting for me to acknowledge it. And when I looked into its eyes, something inside me snapped. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I the real Danny, or had I already been replaced? Rodney's grip tightened. Danny, look at me. I turned toward him, and that's when I saw it. The rearview mirror. Rodney was in the reflection. The back seat was in the reflection. But I wasn't. 3:50 p.m. The last emergency alert. The radio crackled again. Emergency alert system. Rodney flinched. If you are receiving this broadcast, do not return to the playground. My breathing hitched. If you are receiving this broadcast, you may already be compromised. Rodney stared at me, and I knew what he was thinking. What if I wasn't me? What if I had never been me since the first time I stepped onto that playground? What if I had already been taken? The thing outside knocked again. Knock, knock, knock. Rodney grabbed the gear shift. I don't care what's happening, he hissed. We're leaving. He slammed his foot on the gas. The car lurched forward. The boy outside didn't move. He just smiled. And as we sped past the playground, as we broke through the wall of fog, I heard his voice one last time. See you soon. 4:30 p.m. Am I still me? We made it back to Rodney's apartment. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us turned on the lights. We just sat there, waiting, listening, but nothing happened. The alerts didn't come back. The knocks never came. The playground was gone. For now. Rodney finally exhaled. So, is it over? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe we had made it out. But then I saw the mirror, saw my reflection, and for a split second, it lagged. Just enough to make my stomach churn. Just enough to make me wonder. And in the quiet, in the empty stillness of the apartment, I thought I heard something. A soft, barely there giggle. I swallowed hard, and in my own voice, I whispered, I don't know.